What's up guys, it's Sunmin and welcome back to Your Money Game, the show where we'll get better with saving, spending and investing. And today we're going to talk about one of the fundamental aspects of investing and why it's so critical, especially if you're younger or you're an average earner. So I heard about compound interest back in my uni days, years ago. I knew the rough potential of it, but I didn't take the right steps and I ended up going into the markets and just trying to trade and go for big wins. In perfect hindsight, I should have just taken the money and invested the chunk of it, but then maybe took some of it out and tried my hand at trading. Instead, I went the exact opposite. So the key takeaway for this video is actually really simple, which is just invest now. The points I want to cover though are what compound interest is. And I don't want to just remain on the intellectual level, but I want you to appreciate emotionally why it's so important. Which leads me to my next point, which is why it's especially critical if you're young or maybe you're an average earner. So if you're ready, let's go. Let's start with the super simple theory of it. You might understand what interest is, which is what you earn on top of your savings as well as your investments. Compound interest simply means that your interest can now earn more interest as time goes by, creating kind of a snowball effect. So let's use a realistic example of something that could happen in our lives. Say you've got two characters, Calvin Cool and Sean Savvy. They both get that investing is important because their parents were telling them to or their friends were telling them to, but only Sean started with about $500 a month at the age of 22. Calvin Cool decides that hey, he's still young and he really wants to kind of live life a little bit more, and he chooses to start instead at the age of 32 with the same $500, and it's only 10 years later than what Sean started at, because 32 is still pretty young, right? They both don't change their investing approach. They each contribute $500 to their fund every month, and every year they earn 7% for the rest of their lives till their retirement age of 62. It's retirement day and Calvin finally checks his balances, and after 30 years of investing and all that compounded growth, he has a cool portfolio of about $610,000. Remember our buddy Sean, he started 10 years earlier. So Calvin had 30 years of investing, but Sean had 40. So if you had to guess what Sean's portfolio value is, you might start to do some mental math. Maybe that's 30% more. Let's say you're feeling generous and you just throw in another 20%. So 900-ish thousand. So even knowing this stuff, I still get blown away by the results. It's not 30% more, it's not 50% more. Sean's final portfolio value is about $1.29 million. That's more than double Calvin's returns. And the difference was only 10 years. So if you're curious how much more money that Calvin needed to invest to try and catch up with Sean to have the same portfolio amount, Calvin would have had to invest more than double the amount that Sean had to just try and catch up. So as you can see, the magic is really time and consistency that allows the snowball to get bigger and bigger. So that's why you should start now. Which brings me to why it matters so much if you're young, but also if you're an average earner. So I define average not because you're an average person, but simply somebody who lives a fairly normal middle-class life. You might start working in your 20s, you get married in your 30s, you have a kid there, and then you eventually retire at about maybe 60-ish. And over the entire time, you earn a respectable middle-class salary. So according to a study I found, most Singaporeans actually start financially planning only seriously between the ages of 35 and 45. That's because in their 20s, they have other goals like saving for marriage and a house, but also spending on a lot of luxuries in life. I don't have the data for Malaysia, but I can imagine the patterns are fairly similar. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but the reality is the older we get, life gets a bit trickier. Let's start at the point where you meet your life partner. Aligning your goals and lifestyle needs with them is already the first big hurdle. Do you both have similar lifestyles? Do you both have similar views on money? And between you both, some new needs might arise that you might not have thought about before. The next issue is that income growth tends to plateau or flatline sooner for the average person. And we also know the median income, so you can roughly guess what the ceiling of your earnings would be like. The median household income in Singapore is roughly about 9,000, And in Malaysia, especially if you live in KL, it's about 10,000 ringgit. What's shocking is a chart I found from a site, Investment Modes, where he analyzed data that was issued by the Singapore government. The chart shows incomes flatlining for the average 4 and 5 bedroom HDB household income. And this ceiling of roughly $10,000 doesn't get any higher for the rest of your lives. And this begins at a young age of roughly 30 to 35. The article he wrote is also really interesting, so I'll link it down below so you can check out his work. The final thing we fail to realize is that the older we get, the more we are exposed to financial shocks. It could be the cost of kids, healthcare for yourself or your parents, and increasingly there's a lot more concern about retrenchment, especially in these COVID times. That's why if you're watching this and you're in an okay position, start now. And while you're at it, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button as well. Since most of us don't start early enough, or I didn't, why do we not take action? What are some of those common mistakes? The first reason is that we're really bad at math and we tend to underestimate how small efforts can really add up over time. Just go back to the Sean and Calvin examples that I talked about earlier. Next is that we tend to underestimate inertia, which simply means you don't take action because you're very comfortable with the status quo. So what tends to happen is, again, as you get older, life throws stuff at you. You tell yourself that, yeah, I'm gonna start tomorrow, I'll start next week, next year, whatever it is, you do not take action and life gets in the way and one day you wake up and you're old. Next is that we overestimate how much we can play catch up. We like to tell ourselves stuff like, hey, you know what, I'll invest only when I have more money. Or we tell ourselves that we'll only do it when we're planning seriously for retirement. The best time to think about investing is when you have freedom of making those decisions and less financial obligations as well. The final issue is that we tend to be impatient. It's either you're young and you're impatient to become rich, or you're older but you're impatient because you're trying to make up for lost time. As a result, we might end up looking for quick wins and hopefully trying to strike it big, but the reality is that wastes even more time because you realize eventually that there's no such thing as a quick win unless you are really lucky. So if you've made it this far, there could be two possible emotional reactions in you. The first is those of you who are inspired and you want to get out there and start right now. Great, you don't need to watch the rest of the video. For the rest of you, I understand that one emotional reaction to this information is that you feel it's very daunting. It's such a big mountain to try and climb, and it can really hold you back. Look, I get it. There's always going to be somebody who's started earlier, who's faster, who's smarter, who's richer. It doesn't matter. All that matters is now, and that we have the power to make a decision to start. If you find that there's some negative thoughts that are getting in the way, fine, acknowledge that they're there, but put it aside and just focus on taking that first step. When it comes to money itself, this isn't an all or nothing situation. Nobody's saying go and sacrifice your total lifestyle, but start allocating a little bit of money to build that habit. And once you have that money set aside for the super long term, begin to set a very simple plan to take action. You can use a robo-advisor, open a brokerage account and buy a single all-world ETF or maybe US total stock market ETF, or maybe go online and look up Boglehead's tree fund portfolio. Whatever it is, just start to get that momentum going. You can always come back and tweak and revise your plan as you go along. Don't be like me and wake up 10 years later and realize, oh my god, what the heck did I do with all that time? So, I hope you found this useful, but more importantly, I hope you take action. Feel free to share your thoughts or questions with me down in the comments below. And if you're feeling generous, please support my channel by hitting that like, subscribe, as well as that bell button, because I'm going to be back again next Sunday with a brand new video. And until then, you take care and keep playing your own game.